Hi there. Yesterday I posted about the Arabesque exercise, and I wanted to take a minute to break it down a little bit and talk about sort of the three main movements that make it up, and that's why it's so amazing. So get yourself a countertop or a chair nearby to rest your hands on, but I'm going to use a dowel rod. So the first aspect of the Arabesque exercise is actually a hinge, a hip hinge. So if I were to pretend like my spine were a rod from tail to head, and then slowly tilt forward at my pelvis, keeping my tail, my rib cage, and my head attached to the dowel rod, as soon as my pelvis stops moving, so does the rest of me. And then slowly back up. So it's a bit hard because a lot of people will arch and lead from their rib cage and then slightly curl their tail because their hamstrings can't tolerate it. And then they're just kind of bending themselves forward. And you can see my low back is round, but my upper back is sort of the leader. So that's not a hip hinge, that's more like a back bending motion. And we're trying to go for pelvic motion. So you hinge, your pelvis tilts forward towards your thigh bones. And you can see when my pelvis stops moving due to hamstring tightness, that's where the rest of my spine stops. Now, most people they don't have as much range of motion. They'll usually stop around here, and that's totally okay. Just wherever you stop is where you stop. So it starts with a hip hinge. The second element of an arabesque is actually our standing pelvic lift, and I've talked about this one a couple times, but you start by transferring your weight. I'm going to go to my right, and you're going to drive your right heel and hip down, 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 down to float your left leg off the ground with a straight knee so that my hips are a little askew. My left one is actually a little bit higher than my right. And then you level off the feet. And then you try the same thing on the other side. You do a little weight transfer. You drive the left heel and hip down, 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 down to float the right side off. So again, my hips are a little askew. My right one is slightly higher than my left, but both knees are straight. It's just that one's clearing the floor because my pelvis has listed or tipped. So one more time on each side. There's a little weight transfer. You drive that right heel and hip down, 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 down to float the left foot off the floor, and it slightly lifts the waist. You're not shoring up in the waist. It's more like a pelvis experience. And then back down. And then same thing, I'll even roll this up. So you transfer the weight, you drive the left heel down, 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 down. You float the right foot off. My hips are a little askew. My waist is not short. It's pretty much the same distance. And then you square off. Okay, and then element number 3 is just backing the weight up on your heels, right? We tend to live a little bit forward on our toes. A lot of that has to do with our footwear. So if we can just back our weight up, and I'll use my dowel rod again, so that the center of my hip lines up over the very center of my heel. If I tend to drift forward, which most people do, you can see how my dowel rod leans forward to the center of my foot. And if I back my weight up, if you picture the heel, it's this really thick, dense bone. That's what's supposed to be accepting the load of your weight, not your skinny little flexible toes, your heels. So we want your heels to accept the load. So those are the 3 elements that make up the arabesque. So let me talk you through it. You picture your dowel rod and you start with your hip hinge where you lean forward. And then again, when your body stops moving, your pelvis stops moving, you rest your hand on your chair or your countertop or whatever's in front of you. Then you do your pelvic lift where you transfer the weight to the right foot, drive the right heel and hip down into the ground, and that floats your left foot off the floor with a dangling foot. My pelvis is neutral. It's really easy to want to tuck under, so you want to keep it tush sticking out a little bit. So my left cheek is slightly higher than my right cheek. And if that's easy, then I'm going to sweep my left leg up into the air. It doesn't have to go high. You're more reaching long. And I'm going to back my weight up so that my thigh bone is very vertical directly over my heel. I'm almost pushing myself backward a little bit. And then you hold and breathe, hold and breathe, hold and breathe until you kind of can't tolerate it, maybe up to a minute, and then bring the floating leg back down. So I'll break it down one more time for the left leg. So you start with your hip hinge, you fold at the pelvis, And then you rest your hands on something like a countertop or a chair. Transfer the weight to the left leg, drive your left heel and hip down, 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 down to float the opposite foot off the floor. My knee is straight. And then I'm gonna sweep that right leg into the air. My toes, you can't see them, are pointed to the floor. Then I'm gonna back my weight up so that my thigh bone is vertical. It's directly over my heel. I'm not forward on my hands and my toes, I'm back on my heel. That's where you're really gonna get a lot of work through the hamstring and glute versus quad and toes. And then back down. So you do a couple repetitions on each side, and then you take a walk afterward, and you can really see how the back chain of the legs have been loaded but in a stretched position. We call that like an eccentric contraction, even though it's an isometric. And then when you walk, you can feel the backs of your legs really driving and working forward. So it's great. Try it. Let me know how it goes.